Imagine having a dog that barely barks. You know, the type that just chills, naps, and lives its best life. Now imagine getting fined by your HO because your dog is too loud. Except he's not. Enter Karen. She's the kind of HOA president who thinks she's the neighborhood sheriff, patrolling the streets with nothing but a clipboard and a bad attitude. She fined me for non-existent barking. So I decided if she was going to pretend my dog was loud, I'd give her something to actually complain about. Let's just say, Karen didn't expect my dog to become her personal nightmare. Before we dive into this wild story, don't forget to subscribe to Tailflow, and drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA Karen. It all started on a regular Tuesday morning. I was sitting on my porch with my dog, Baxter, a sweet, lazy golden retriever who's more interested in napping than barking. Baxter's idea of excitement? Chasing his own tail for 3 seconds before giving up. Barking maybe once a day, usually at a suspicious-looking leaf. So you can imagine my surprise when I found a bright pink HOA violation notice taped to my door. Notice of violation. Your dog has been reported for excessive barking, disturbing the peace, and violating HOA noise ordinances. A fine of $150 has been issued. I stared at it, genuinely confused. Excessive barking? Baxter was literally asleep at my feet. But then I saw her, Karen, standing across the street with her arms crossed, glaring at me like she just caught me committing a felony. I walked over, holding the notice. "Karen, what's this about?" I asked, trying to keep my cool. She didn't even blink. "Your dog's barking is a nuisance. Some of us like to enjoy a peaceful neighborhood." I looked down at Baxter. He was still asleep. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean this dog?" Karen's face twisted into that classic Karen scowl. "Don't be smart," she snapped. "The rules apply to everyone." That's when I realized this wasn't about barking. Karen just wanted to flex her HOA power. Determined to prove her point, Karen actually submitted evidence to the HOA board, a grainy phone recording of nothing, just ambient neighborhood sounds with maybe the faintest bark in the distance. And it wasn't even Baxter's bark. I knew because Baxter's bark sounds like he's trying to say boof while yawning. But Karen was committed. "This is clear proof," she claimed at the next HOA meeting. Everyone in the room just stared at her. But here's the kicker, the HOA backed her up. Because Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she was the HOA president. So they hit me with another fine. That's when I decided. If Karen was going to fine me for barking, that didn't exist. I'd give her barking she'd never forget. I didn't want to just annoy Karen. I wanted to beat her at her own game. So I called up my friend Mike, who's a professional dog trainer. "Hey, Mike," I said, "can you teach Baxter a new trick?" Mike laughed. "What kind of trick?" I grinned. "I want Baxter to bark, but only when Karen walks by." Mike was all in. We started training Baxter with a simple routine. Whenever Karen walked past our house, I'd give Baxter a treat after he barked. At first, he was confused. But Baxter is a smart boy. Within a week, he'd figured it out. Whenever Karen came into view, boef, it was the laziest bark you've ever heard, but loud enough to get her attention. And Karen, she was about to get a taste of her own medicine. By the end of the first week, Baxter had perfected his new trick. Every time Karen walked by like clockwork, he let out a perfectly timed lazy bark. Not aggressive, not nonstop, just a single, well-placed bow that echoed through the neighborhood like a polite middle finger. And Karen, she hated it. The first time Baxter barked directly at her, Karen froze. She spun around, squinting like she wasn't sure if he'd actually done it on purpose. But by the third day, it was clear. This wasn't a coincidence. Whenever she walked by, whether she was pretending to check her mail, inspecting her flower beds, or doing one of her fake neighborhood patrols, Baxter greeted her with his signature boa. Karen's reaction evolved quickly. Day 1, confused side-eye. Day 3, annoyed glares. Day 5, full-on rage. She marched across the street, arms flailing, demanding, "Control your dog." I sipped my coffee and shrugged. He's just expressing himself. You know, like dogs do. Karen's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. It was beautiful. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, I found another bright pink violation notice taped to my door. Notice of violation. Ongoing disruptive barking from your dog is creating a hostile environment for neighbors. A fine of $200 has been issued. At this point, it was almost impressive how determined she was. But I wasn't worried because I'd been recording everything. I had video footage of Baxter barking only when Karen walked by, audio clips showing no barking at any other time, proof that Karen was the real problem. I compiled everything into a neat little folder labeled Exhibit of the Karen Chronicles. And then I did the most satisfying thing ever. I requested an official HOA hearing. The meeting was held in the community center, with the full HOA board present. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking smug, like she'd already won. But as soon as the hearing started, I stood up. I'd like to present some evidence. I connected my laptop to the projector and hit play. The room watched footage of Karen walking by my house, Baxter letting out a single bark, Karen flinching, turning around, and glaring like she was being attacked by a wild beast. The board members exchanged glances. A few of them were clearly trying not to laugh. When the video ended, I calmly said, "As you can see, Baxter isn't disruptive. He's responsive." Karen's face was priceless, her mouth open, but no words came out. She was furious, but she couldn't argue with the footage. After a tense silence, the president cleared her throat. "Well, I don't think this qualifies as excessive barking." Karen slammed her fist on the table. "This is harassment." The president raised an eyebrow. "Karen, you're the one who filed the complaint." For once, Karen had nothing to say. By the end of the hearing, all the fines against me were dropped. The HOA board issued a warning to Karen about filing frivolous complaints. And best of all, they implemented a new rule. Barking complaints must be supported by substantial evidence, which meant Karen's reign of terror was officially over. But Baxter? Oh, he kept barking whenever she walked by. Not because he had to, but because at that point it was tradition. After the HOA hearing, most people would have accepted defeat. Not Karen. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was enraged. Because not only did she lose the case, but now she had to deal with the fact that Baxter's bark had become legendary in the neighborhood. But instead of letting it go, Karen decided to do what Karens do best: make things worse. A few weeks after the hearing, I started getting anonymous HOA noise complaints. Not official fines, just petty letters slipped into my mailbox. The notes read, "Your dog's barking is disrupting the peace. Please consider professional training for your loud dog. Some neighbors are considering legal action due to the noise." The handwriting was messy, but the tone? Pure Karen. I knew it was her. And honestly, I couldn't believe she was still trying. So I decided if Karen wanted to play games, I'd play too. I bought a small motion-activated speaker online. Nothing fancy, just a device that could play a sound when someone walked past it. Then I recorded Baxter's iconic and programmed it into the speaker. I set it up behind a bush near my front yard. Now, whenever Karen walked by, the speaker would let out a perfect, realistic bark. The best part? Baxter was usually inside sleeping. The first time it went off, I watched from my window as Karen jumped, spun around, and glared at the empty yard. She even squinted, looking for Baxter, but he was nowhere to be seen. She stormed away, clearly frustrated. But the next day, it happened again and again. Karen started walking faster past my house, looking over her shoulder like she was being haunted. Because in a way, she was. By a bark with no dog. After a week of dealing with the phantom barking, Karen completely snapped. I was watering my lawn when she marched up, her face redder than ever. "Where's the dog?" she barked ironically. I looked around, confused. "What dog?" "Your dog. The one that keeps barking at me." I smiled. "Oh, Baxter. He's inside, napping. Hasn't been outside all day." Karen's eyes narrowed. She stormed over to the bush where the speaker was hidden, still ranting, until she accidentally triggered the motion sensor. BOF. She jumped like she'd been electrocuted, stumbled backward, and fell right into my flower bed. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. She scrambled to her feet, covered in dirt, and pointed a shaking finger at me. This isn't over. But deep down, she knew it was. The next HOA meeting was the last straw for her. She tried to file yet another complaint, this time claiming I had set up a barking machine to harass her. The board just stared at her. One member even whispered, "Is that even a thing?" After 10 minutes of her ranting, the HOA president finally said, "Karen, I think the problem isn't the barking. I think the problem is you." And that was it. Karen resigned from the HOA board a week later. Rumor has it she claimed she was too stressed to handle the position. I wonder why. As for Baxter, he still gives her a friendly whenever she dares to walk by. Not because he has to, but because he knows it drives her crazy. And honestly, that's good enough for me. With Karen officially resigned from the HOA, the neighborhood felt like a completely different place. No more petty violation notices. No more angry rants at HOA meetings. And best of all, no more Karen lurking around like she was the neighborhood sheriff. But even though she was gone, her legacy lived on, just not in the way she probably wanted. After everything that happened, Baxter wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a local hero. Neighbors would walk by, giving him little treats or stopping to say, "Good job keeping the neighborhood in check, Baxter." Kids started calling him the Karen detector. Whenever he'd bark, someone would joke, "Oh, must be a Karen nearby." It became a running gag. People even started making memes in the neighborhood Facebook group. My favorite one, a photo of Baxter with a caption, "Protecting the streets, one boof at a time." I never thought my lazy golden retriever would become a legend, but here we were. After Karen left the HOA, the new board members wanted to make some changes. They focused on actual issues like fixing sidewalks, maintaining common areas, and organizing community events. But the best change, they unofficially renamed the neighborhood a Karen-free zone. At the next block party, someone even made a banner that said, "Welcome to a bark-friendly, Karen-free neighborhood." It was glorious. Even neighbors who never got involved before started showing up to events. It was like the community had rebooted, and people were actually happy. As for Karen, she didn't move away. She still lived in the same house, but now she was just another neighbor with zero power. She'd walk past my yard occasionally, trying to act like none of it ever happened. But every time she did, Baxter would give her that classic lazy buff. Not loud, not aggressive, just a friendly little reminder. I'm still here. Karen would flinch every time, and it never got old. Looking back, this whole situation taught me a few valuable lessons. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people be themselves. Karen's biggest downfall wasn't me or Baxter. It was her own behavior. Don't underestimate the power of petty. A single, well-timed bark can cause more chaos than a full-blown argument. Neighborhoods are better when people work together, not against each other. Once Karen was gone, the community actually felt like a community again. And most importantly, if someone's going to fine you for your dog barking, teach the dog to bark with purpose. Because nothing's more satisfying than turning a petty complaint into a neighborhood legend. And that's how my lazy golden retriever Baxter went from a nap-loving fluffball to the unofficial neighborhood legend, all thanks to one petty HOA Karen. What do you think? Have you ever dealt with a neighbor or an HOA member who just couldn't mind their own business? Or maybe you've had to get a little creative with your own revenge stories. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video to keep HOA Karens in check. Subscribe to Tailflow for more wild HOA drama and revenge stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next showdown. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes a little boof goes a long way. See you in the next one.